Britain has changed prime ministers, but the decisions made during a new leader's first week often shape the next 5 years. Before Parliament votes, before the first budget, before the headlines settle, early priorities reveal how a government intends to govern. Tonight we examine what is confirmed, what is being reported, and what Britain's new Prime Minister could mean for the United Kingdom, and for the wider Anglosphere. This is the Anglosphere Report. Begin with the transition itself, because the manner of it is as significant as the outcome. On Friday, July 17, 2026, Andy Burnham was confirmed as leader of Britain's governing Labour Party. He is set to be appointed Prime Minister on Monday, succeeding Keir Starmer. Britain remains one of the world's largest economies, a leading NATO power, and a founding member of the Five Eyes intelligence alliance. Changes in Westminster rarely stay confined to Westminster. Burnham will become Britain's 7th Prime Minister in a decade of political instability. Since the Brexit referendum, Britain has experienced an extraordinary period of political turnover, with successive leaders confronting Brexit implementation, the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation, the energy crisis, and slowing economic growth. Burnham now inherits the next chapter of that story. The path here was unusual. Burnham was not, at the start of this year, a Member of Parliament. He was the Mayor of Greater Manchester. To become Labour leader, party rules required him to hold a common seat, so in May, a sitting Labour MP resigned specifically to trigger a by-election in Makerfield, which Burnham then won on June 18th, returning him to Westminster for the first time in over a decade. That sequence, a seat vacated to create a path to the leadership, is itself a rare event in modern British politics. On the scale of his mandate within the party, this documentary must note a genuine discrepancy in reporting. Multiple outlets, including RTE, cite Burnham's final backing at 349 Labour MPSIB times UK in a separate report, cites 322. Both figures represent a substantial majority sufficient to make any leadership challenge mathematically impossible under party rules. But this documentary states the range honestly, rather than presenting a single figure as more precise than the underlying reporting actually is. In his acceptance speech, he pledged to give people hope back. Describing a political culture and economic model, he said, simply doesn't work well enough for ordinary people. Why digital ID is being abandoned? The previous government's digital ID program, intended primarily to support right-to-work checks and immigration enforcement, had become one of the most contested policies of Starmer's premiership. Supporters argued that a secure digital identity could simplify access to public services, reduce fraud, and improve verification processes. Critics questioned whether those benefits justified the potential expansion of state-held digital identity systems, and civil liberties groups described it as, in their words, a solution in search of a problem. Polling cited by political commentator John Rentoul found slightly more Britons opposed the Starmer-era plan than supported it. According to reporting from LBC and other outlets within hours of Burnham's confirmation, Burnham intends to scrap the wider digital ID program, retaining existing right-to-work checks instead. This is a reported plan sourced to multiple outlets in the hours immediately following Burnham's confirmation, not yet a formal announced government policy with legislative detail attached. A cost of living government? In his first major speech after returning to Parliament, Burnham set out what he described as a decade-long plan to bring down the cost of water, housing, energy, and transport. He framed this within a philosophy he has termed Manchesterism, a phrase he used directly in comments to Reuters, arguing that restoring public control over key services would lower long-term costs for the state, in contrast to decades of deregulation, privatization, and austerity. He says weakened public finances. The fiscal reality he inherits is specific and confirmed, though it requires precision. The £4.7 billion figure widely reported is not a general fiscal gap. It is a shortfall specifically within the Defence Investment Plan. A £15 billion increase in defence spending, of which the Treasury confirmed only £10.3 billion in funding, with the remaining £4.7 billion to be confirmed at Budget 2026 in a fair and balanced way. Defense Minister Luke Pollard told Sky News that Burnham himself only saw the full financial breakdown the day it was published, a detail some reporting has characterized as a poison pill left for his incoming government to resolve. Housing, energy, and public services. In public, Burnham has consistently argued that housing affordability is not only an economic issue, but a question of national opportunity, linking regional regeneration with increased housing supply and stronger local decision-making. As mayor of Greater Manchester, he called in 2017 for party leaders to treat housing as a human right like health or education. His flagship structural proposal, confirmed directly from his own remarks, is the creation of an outpost of Downing Street based in Manchester, which he has called Number 10 in the North. He described this as the nerve center for delivering reindustrialization and regional regeneration, part of what he called the biggest rebalancing of power our country has seen. On North Sea energy specifically, this documentary was unable to independently verify confirmed reporting on Burnham's policy direction at time of production. Given Britain's existing tension between climate commitments, energy security, and employment in Scotland's North Sea sector, this remains a genuine open question, marked here as unknown, not assumed. On defense, Burnham has been explicit and consistent. His first stated priority is to retain Britain's commitment to NATO and to the country's nuclear deterrent, alongside upgrading military equipment through the Defense Investment Plan. That continuity suggests allies are unlikely to expect a fundamental shift in Britain's core security commitments, despite possible domestic policy changes elsewhere. The challenges awaiting him are structural, not speculative. The £4.7 billion defense funding gap requiring resolution at Budget 2026, a Labour Party that has fallen from 34% of the vote in 2024 to roughly 19% in recent polling, and a resurgent Reform UK. What does this mean for the wider Anglosphere? Burnham's explicit, repeated commitment to NATO and Britain's nuclear deterrent suggests continuity in the UK's core Five Eyes and NATO relationships, a signal likely read with some relief in Washington, Ottawa, Canberra, and Wellington. Where allies may watch more closely is domestic. A government explicitly oriented toward reversing privatization and increasing public ownership represents a different economic philosophy than the market-oriented consensus that has shaped Anglosphere economic policy for 4 decades. The same era Burnham has said he wants to end. Whether that domestic shift affects trade relationships or broader alignment with allied economic policy is not yet answerable. It is a question this documentary flags for continued observation. Governments are often remembered not for the promises they make on their first day, but for the choices they make when those promises meet political reality. Andy Burnham now inherits an economy under pressure, public services facing significant demands, and an electorate looking for results. Whether these first decisions become lasting reforms or early course corrections will only become clear over time. For now, the evidence tells us where the new government says it wants to go. History will judge whether it arrives there. I'm the Anglosphere Report, connecting the stories shaping the Anglosphere and the world. Because understanding today's decisions is often the first step to understanding tomorrow's history. If a prime minister's first act is to govern from outside his own capital, is that a symbol of change or evidence that it has already begun?